Zoro versus Sanji. Ever since Wano, or even Whole Cake Island, I've been hearing a lot of, when is Zoro gonna have his Sanji moment? Sanji got the great double backstory. Where is Zoro's? So does that make Sanji character better than Zoro's? We can say Sanji's a little more flushed out than Zoro. Probably had a little more depth as far as exploring the ins and outs of his character. But does that make him a better character than Zoro? Looking back at it, to me, Zoro's character has always been just a little bit different from the rest of him. How he's used and how he's utilized has been a little bit different. He's able to stand out or stand alone in a way that didn't necessarily call for a long, flushed out story. What drives Zoro's is a little bit more simple. See, while Sanji has Baratie and then Whole Cake Island, Nami has Arlong Park, Usopp has Surf Village, Chopper has Drum Island, Zoro had an episode of a backstory that just detailed him meeting a friend, Kuina, them sharing a goal. One of them was going to become the world's strongest swordsman, and then her passing away, leaving Zoro solely to carry the burden of that goal. And for the most part, that's basically Zoro. Zoro's goal and what drives him. Just simply that simple. For everyone else, is a little bit different. For Robin, it's soul and poneglyphs and the world government things that we would have to see more of. We would have to go through Robin's life to truly understand and get her character. We have to see the Buster Code. We have to know about Ohara. Zoro didn't necessarily need a Ohara. He didn't went through the tragedy the other crewmates went through. In his own right, he struggled in losing his friend, but it's not the same as the Sanji stranded on the island 69 days. No food, just him and Zeph. And then going through the emotions of him becoming the character he is today, mainly because of Zeph. Not hitting women, Zeph. Feeding anyone that's hungry, no matter who you are, tied to Zeph, and his time stranded on that rock. For most of these characters, there are things and people placed in their lives and in their stories that we had to see to understand them. We have to go to Drum Island to see Chopper and the old doctor to understand Chopper. While Zoro was planned to have an extended role in Wano and we see his backstory, his lineage a little bit more that got cut, it was also able to be cut because outside of just lineage and him being a swordsman and coming from a family of swordsmen, we know his ties to Ryuma now. That was a distant ancestor of him. But at the same time, his ties to Ryuma cuts there. Outside of the fact that him being able to meet the corpse of Ryuma and being able to get Shisui from it, Zoro's impact to family and lineage, as far as we know without assuming, is right there. There is a blank for us in Zoro's life of before he showed up as a kid in the village that we don't know where he was or what he was doing or how he got there. But at the same time, he was still a kid at the time. So what may have happened or the chances of a big major event happening to Zoro before we met him is very unlikely. So at the same time, Zoro doesn't necessarily need the drawn out family lineage that everyone got. When it comes to achieving his goal, Zoro has the most tangible goalposts to hit, to say. For Sanji and his goal, finding the All Blue, we know, all set up by him and his little cookbook, him wanting to find the All Blue, meeting Zeph who shared that dream, and then Zeph changing his character. And now, there isn't necessarily goalposts for Sanji to hit. It's just go on the journey, help Luffy, fight when you have to fight, cook for the crew, and then eventually we'll find the All Blue while we explore. For Nami, she went through all she went through with Arlong that we had to see. But for the most part, for now, travel the world with the crew, help out when you can, draw your world map. Somewhere in the end, we'll see the results. Zoro's goalposts are way more tangible. Meet Mr. One, learn to cut iron. Somewhere along the line, master the breath of all things. Learn and make a black blade. Meet Mihawk, fight Mihawk. There are way more tangible things that we could reach out and get. So Zoro character tends to differ from the other characters in that way of the things that Zoro can do and get a great moment out of it. The other characters can't really. When you think of everyone else, most of their great character moments where we learn the most about them or feel like they're amazing characters, for the most part comes from when we first met them or when we do a deep dive into their backstory and why they are the way they are. For Zoro, he has great moments just scattered through that has nothing necessarily to do with him. Or not that it has nothing to do with him, it's just Luffy driven. Because unlike everyone else, Zoro became an anchor to Luffy. And their character, from a writing standpoint, became tied to each other in a way. So unlike all the other characters, Zoro and Luffy bounce off of each other in a way more special way that hits completely different. Nami and Luffy have a few moments, so does Sanji and Luffy. But Zoro and Luffy, it's just a different level. In Water 7, after the Usopp versus Luffy fight, when Luffy's about to cry and he pulls the hat over his face, and Zoro's like, you can't do that. This is the weight of a captain. That moment does wonders for both characters. Because the lighthearted Luffy, who wants to be lighthearted, is now being forced to step up and step into the role of a captain by the way more serious, but still can be lighthearted Zoro. But this isn't the time for that. This is the time for you to be our captain. And our captain can't be crying. On Zou, while picking a fight with Big Mom and then stuffed brewing with Kaido, and everybody else is just letting Luffy be Luffy, Zoro is the one like, hey, that's two different Yonkos. It's too much for us to handle. We can't be doing that. Straighten up. That's how Whole Cake Island became a stealth mission of trying to get in, get Sanji, get the poneglyphs, and get out. Before Luffy was trying to go fight two Yonkos head to head at the same time. Zoro, the anchor, we can't do that. Stopping him. And the biggest example of this, tied into a big bow, starting with the nothing happened moment of Zoro verbally declaring his devotion to Luffy and his will and ability and willingness to give up his goal, give up his dream, his childhood dream of becoming the world's strongest swordsman, putting that on the back burner to making his #1 priority Luffy's right-hand man. And nothing happened is one of the greatest moments in One Piece, and definitely the greatest moment of Zoro's character, showing his loyalness to Luffy. And outside of the show, when a lot of people talk about Zoro, it's actually what they talk about. You see Zoro on the list. If it isn't about the most lost character in anime ever, it's about the most loyal character in anime ever. And Zoro is damn near always on that list, being debated in that category. So starting from that and ending up with Zoro going to Mihawk, going to his end rival, going to the man he's supposed to surpass, and asking him for instructions, asking him to become his teacher, not so that he can become a better swordsman to beat him, his goal, but so that he can become a better swordsman to help and protect Luffy the best he can, to be the best right-hand man to Luffy that he can. And the subtle differences in how Zoro character is written is why moments like that can hit so hard for Zoro versus the rest of the crew that don't really have these moments. Nami biggest moment, character moment, especially with Luffy involved, stabbing her arm, mostly tied to her and her past, and Luffy now coming into it and being able to help and prove that he's a friend to her, proving that pirates are different, changing her mindset on pirates. See the difference of that being tied more to Nami and her backstory, her past troubles that Luffy can now come help about. Chopper and his view of himself, not wanting to be a monster. Luffy stepping in and showing him, we gonna love you no matter what. post time skip Fishman Island, Chopper is able to say, "I will happily be a monster for Luffy's sake." Luffy coming in and helping Chopper with his identity crisis from before they met. For Zoro, he's already set. He already has his goal. He's already on his way of achieving his goal. Luffy comes in and Zoro has to devote himself differently to Luffy than he did before. And in that very subtle way, these characters are able to be used in different ways. And for Zoro, it doesn't take away from his character that he didn't have an intro moment. And we just met him, he joined the crew, and then we were able to go on and flush out and deep dive into other characters in a different way than he got it, even though he is the Dorogonist and the second in command on the crew. So no, Zoro lineage isn't directly tied to his character like that, and probably would never be seen or flushed out in the show. But that's because it doesn't affect his character as much as Luffy does. For everyone else, it's kind of like 50-50. Luffy, just as much as everything that they had when we met them. For Zoro, is way more Luffy in the future than Kuina in the past. We already got everything we needed for the most part that we can tell for sure for Zoro. Now it's just to look for the future. Now, before Whole Cake Island, I definitely didn't see a second backstory for Sanji coming, so we can cook up something for Zoro. But as of right now, highly doubt it, and I wouldn't see it coming out of left field. I have nowhere to think we would go for Zoro as far as something he experienced before Luffy, like the rest of them. I wouldn't be surprised if something else came up for Robin. The time skip, we know she was with the revolutionaries. That's very possible. Something else can come up. But for Zoro, right now, his role and how he's written to be an anchor to Luffy. And his character is just as equally anchored to Luffy as it is to his goal of becoming the world's greatest swordsman. So does that make Sanji character better than Zoro character, or Zoro character better than Sanji character? I'll leave that part up to you. For me, they're both amazing characters, used in different ways to do different things to the story, but both great nonetheless.
Yeah, I know that you gon' say, 'cause you need something real, for real.